Okay, so hi everyone. I'm Matt Buck, as Bill mentioned. I'm the co-founder and CTO of a company called Voxable. So we're a conversational interface agency located in Austin, Texas. So this is Voxable's office in the Hyde Park neighborhood in Austin. We're right across the street from Quacks, if you know the area. So my fiance and I founded Voxable 3 years ago. You can't quite see it, but there on our door is our mission statement: helping humans and machines better understand each other. So we do that by helping companies design, develop, and market conversational user interfaces, and also providing custom training and consulting around conversational user interfaces. So what is a conversational user interface? So at the highest level, a conversational interface is any interface where the main mode of interaction is conversation. So those conversations can happen in a variety of ways. So they could be textual, so text messaging applications that we're familiar with, which are asynchronous and very popular. So you could build a chat bot on Facebook Messenger that you communicate with via chat. They could be vocal, where users are speaking and listening in real time. So this would be the smart speaker devices like the Amazon Alexa, the Google Home. These are intelligent assistants that you can talk to directly on those devices. They could also have visual interfaces. So these are interfaces that contain and leverage visual elements. But those visuals are really contextual to the conversation itself. So this would be using the Google Assistant app on your phone, which actually incorporates visual interface elements, or Amazon's Echo Show, or the Siri, which you can use on your phone or on the desktop. So those conversations are delivered on a variety of devices, and they're within applications that can span the various devices. You can start a conversation on the Google Home device and pick it up in the Assistant app if you'd like. And any machine that you can talk to, the interface by which you communicate with it is a conversational interface. So now let's talk a little bit about how conversational interfaces actually work. So the way that we explain that at Voxable is using what we call the conversational interaction loop. So we know that the primary method of interaction will be conversation, but we need to understand how a machine actually handles that conversation. So in order for a conversation to take place with a machine, that machine needs to listen, understand, process, and respond. So conversation also has two modes that it could be delivered, either via voice or via text. So either speaking or just with the chat. When a human speaks to a machine needs to understand that collection of sounds, actually translate that into text. So this is done with what's called automatic speech recognition. So automatic speech recognition is what actually translates sound into text. So advances in the accuracy of automatic speech recognition have really reached a point where they are reliable and usable. And the advancements in this recognition are really growing exponentially. So voice interfaces are learning to understand a more diverse range of voices, of dialects and accents as the usage of these conversational interfaces increases. So the technology is generally provided by the devices that we're using. It's either built into our browsers in devices like the Echo or the Google Home, and our phones and our computer operating systems. So Google search is a great way to see automatic speech recognition in action. So if you look closely, you can see that it's actually the understanding of the words spoken is actually changing as the user speaks. So Google has some of the best speech recognition technology available today. So you can also talk to a conversational interface via a chat platform. So here's a bot we built for the Sound on Sound Festival. We also worked with South by Southwest this past year to build a messenger chat bot for that festival. So I can get the information about buttons by browsing through various swipe galleries, or I can just ask a question directly, right? I could say, what time is Courtney Barnett playing? And actually get an answer back from the machine. So have the conversations. And all of the chat platforms really have different affordances. So you want to dive into their documentation and use prototyping tools, and that's going to help you get a better sense of all the possibilities. Many of the platforms also have the interface elements that are available in sketch files for prototyping interactions. Here we're looking at some of the visual affordances that are available to you when you're on the Google Assistant platform. So once the user has spoken to us or they've typed out a message, we've got this raw text. But that text is still messy human speech that a machine doesn't necessarily understand. So we need to implement natural language understanding. And that's what's going to take that messy human speech and actually translate it into structured data that a machine can actually understand using artificial intelligence. So let's take a look at an example. So here we've got some messy human speech that a machine can't really do something with, right? Show me an event about conversational interfaces happening at St. Edward's this evening. So if we pass that into a program that we wrote, like I said, it really wouldn't know what to do. So if we ran this through a natural language understanding or an NLU system, it would try to make sense of it for us. So we can do this in a couple of ways. It will do this in a couple of ways, leveraging a couple of different concepts. And one is intent recognition, and that's actually recognizing the user's intent, so what it is that they're trying to accomplish. And so we can see here that the user is searching for events, right? And the other thing that it's going to do is actually entity extraction, it's called, and that's pulling the data out of the user's speech that we're going to need to actually fulfill the request. So in this case, that's going to be the topic, conversational interfaces, the location, and the specific time that they're wondering about. So these two concepts, intent recognition and entity extraction, really form the core of natural language understanding. So if we passed this speech to a natural language understanding system, it might hand us back something that looks like this. So here, this is JSON or JavaScript object notation. So this is structured data. We could hand this to our application, and the computer would have a much easier time dealing with it. So it's told us the user's intent, that they're trying to search for events, and it's also listed the entities, so the data that we'll need to actually perform that event search on their behalf. So another cool thing you can see that it's done, it's taken that natural language phrase, this evening, and actually translated it into an actual date and time for us. So we could say, next Thursday or last March, and it would actually take that speech, that natural language, and hand us back an actual date or a range of dates based on knowing, okay, what's today? What is the next Thursday from today? What is the previous March from today? So Amazon Alexa, actually it has its own NLU platform that you're kind of locked into using. But there are also natural language understanding services that you can use in any application. There's Google's Dialogflow, which we'll be talking about in a moment. Microsoft has Lewis. IBM has Watson. There's an open source natural language understanding platform known as RASA. And it's really the rise of these NLU platforms which has made this technology affordable and accessible. And that's really what's ignited all of the interest in this conversational interface space. So for independent developers and startups, they no longer have to invest in having a team of data scientists and PhDs in computational linguistics to build a custom statistical model of language from the ground up. You can really hit the ground running with these platforms, and it's very, very simple to get started, as we'll see here in a moment. So once we have that meaning and that data extracted from the text, we need a system or logic to really understand how to handle that information. And at Voxable, we call this bot intelligence. So the ultimate result of bot intelligence is that actions are carried out and responses to the user are composed. So this is the core logic of the bot itself. So if it's a bot like the one we just talked about, it might need to call an API with info about the events to actually perform that event search and then build a proper response particular to the platform that we're on. So, if we're on the Google Assistant, maybe we could put together a swipe gallery of those events. And once the bot intelligence has given us an answer, which could be that the action was successful or that a piece of information was retrieved, we need to actually deliver that answer to the user. So in a voice-based interaction, we'd be using audio feedback in the form of synthesized speech. So this is called text-to-speech. So this is the technology that tells machines how to form sounds that are close to human speech, right? So you can use synthesized speech, you can use recorded audio as well. So you'd have some voice actors actually record every possible response your system produces. And a messaging channel, the response would be delivered through those messaging app affordances that we reviewed earlier. So this is the basic technology needed to have a conversation with a machine. It needs to be able to listen to us, to understand what we said, to process that, and then actually respond. So why should you care about conversational interfaces? Well, language is the human API, right? Most of your brain is actually devoted to speech, to listening, and to speaking. Language is the way that humans communicate to one another. And when your user sits down to use your software, they already know what it is they want to do. They can either communicate that via pointing and clicking and typing, or they can just speak. They know that they want to check last quarter's sales figures, or search for events, or order a pizza, or check the bus schedule. And really just being able to ask, just using your voice to ask a computer to do something is a magical experience. As I mentioned, I started the company with my fiance a few years ago. We had gotten a hold of a device called an Ubi. It was a predecessor to the Amazon Alexa. And I had long had this dream of just walking into a room and saying, hey, TV, turn on. And I was able to make that happen. And that first time that I was able to kind of speak my will into the air and watch it become manifest was truly, truly magical. It was the closest to feeling like a wizard I've ever felt as an engineer, because that's what wizards do. They say what they want, and it happens. And voice is the future. This is definitely going to be a big part of the way that we interact with technology in the future. And if you don't ask me, just ask Captain Picard. So this line is a reference to Star Trek: The Next Generation. So this was Captain Jean-Luc Picard's standard order, that he would just speak out loud, and then the fabricator would produce the tea for him. Maybe we'll get there in a few years as well. So these characters on Star Trek would boldly stride from room to room in their little future onesies, turning lights on and off and controlling the temperature. And that was really inspiring to me as a kid. I wanted to be able to do that. And now I can walk into my living room and say, computer, turn on the TV. And that didn't take a team of professional installers and thousands of dollars. I didn't need Geordie LaForge's help. It took an afternoon and less than $200. So now that we know what a conversational interface is, let's talk a little bit about Dialogflow. So Dialogflow is the latest addition to the Google Cloud platform. So this is actually the result of an acquisition of a product called API.ai. So Dialogflow is a powerful natural language understanding platform that you can use to build conversational interfaces. So it's actually the technology that powers the Google Assistant platform. So today we're going to take a look at how a business might make use of Dialogflow. And we'll be talking about Sleepingtons. So Sleepingtons is a fictional, mid-sized e-commerce business, and they have a few different goals. They're looking to improve their customer support. They'd like to enhance the productivity of their sales managers, and they also want to find new sales channels. So let's start with that first use case at Sleepingtons, looking to enhance their customer support. So this is a really valuable use case for conversational interfaces. Very, very popular use case is the support space. So as companies are striving to meet customers' expectations in service and support, automated support solutions are really necessary to reduce their overall costs. And conversational interfaces can help the folks who are handling support by automating those repetitive and known issues, so really handling that low-level support, and handling the tougher problems for humans and handing off those tougher problems to the humans that are better able to handle them. And you can think about transforming your frequently asked questions page into a conversational experience so users can get automated answers directly in the support chat. So if I wanted to get started, the first thing I'm going to do is create an agent. So here I am in the Dialogflow console. This is where you do the work of building your natural language understanding models. So I'm creating a new agent. Of a bot that you're working on, and after I create that, I'll be taken to a page that looks like this. So here we can really see the entirety of the console, and over there on the left I've got my menu. I'm looking at the intents, so those are the user goals, the things the user wants to do, in this case the questions the user might ask, the frequently asked questions. Over there on the right we have a test console that we'll talk about a little bit more in a moment. So now that I've got that agent created, I need to start thinking about, okay, what questions do we want the bot to be able to answer? So after the business objectives and the goals are defined, and in a moment I'm going to try to move that out of the way. Nope. All right. So after those business objectives and goals are defined for a project, the designers need to understand the users that will be conversing with their system. So this can happen through talking with users and formal interviews, through observing user behavior and ethnographic studies, by analyzing data like chat logs. The designers must translate those user insights gathered through research into dialogues the interface will need to support. And the way that we do that is through an affinity diagramming exercise. So affinity diagramming, if you have ever seen a bunch of UX researchers kind of huddled around a wall, grouping various Post-it notes together, they're probably doing one of these affinity diagramming exercises. So we take users through these exercises in our conversational design workshops. So in that exercise, we're going to be writing down what the user might ask the bot, as many of those as we can think of. These are called user utterances. We're putting these on sticky notes, and we'll cluster those sticky notes into common groups. So we'll start to identify those common intents that the user might have. So for an affinity diagramming exercise here, we're just going to be thinking of as many questions as user might ask, and then starting to group those to recognize those common themes. So this is one of the steps in the kind of conversational design process. This is a really great activity for stakeholders and teams to really envision the needs and the mindset of their users. So one of the goals, oh yeah, so there we go. So once we have those intents defined and we have the questions we'd like to ask listed, we'll need to start creating some intents. So intents these are the things we expect the user to say, the goals that they're going to express to us. And so here, we're creating a question. The user's going to be asking if returns are allowed. So I've added a name for the intent up there at the top, and I've clicked save. And then I'm going to go down to this training phrases section. And training phrases, these are where I'm putting the user utterances. So these are all the various ways that I might expect a user to ask this particular question. So you see I've got, are returns allowed? How long after a purchase can I return something? So for any intent that a user has, there might be several different ways that they're going to try to express that intent to us, right? There's lots of variation in language, and here with these user utterances for this intent, we're trying to capture as much of that variation as we can, so we can help to build this natural language understanding model, so when the user asks a question, it can be properly recognized, right? That's that intent recognition piece. So once I save that intent, we'll see this down at the bottom. It's going to tell us that the agent training has started, and then it'll pop another message to let us know when it's completed. And so that's really the process of Dialogflow building that model for us each time that we make a change. So once I've made a change, I'll actually want to test it out in that test console over there on the right. So I'll say I want to return something, and I'll see that, cool, it's actually recognized the intent. It's properly recognized that someone has asked to return something, and we'll also see that I said I want to return something, but that isn't actually one of the utterances, right? So I don't have to list everything exactly, but as long as I've captured enough variation in my utterances, the model should be able to properly identify that intent. So once I've got the intent built with my utterances, I actually need to add a response. So this is what in this case, what our support bot should respond to the user. So I've gone down to the responses section, I've added my response, and I click save one more time. And now I'm going to add what's called a one-click integration. So Dialogflow has several one-click integrations, so I can actually integrate my bot with a number of different platforms automatically. And so here I'm building a Google Assistant app, and I've told it to auto-preview the changes, just telling it anytime I make a change, I want to be able to see it automatically. And as I mentioned, there are a number of different platforms that the Assistant actually works with. So there's the Google Assistant, Facebook Messenger, Slack, actually 14 different platforms. You can see there's one suspiciously missing from the list, and that's Google's enterprise chat offering, Hangouts Chat. Hangouts Chat actually does allow you to build bots in the same manner as you're probably familiar with Slack chat bots. They've released the APIs for building those third-party bots, so I would expect to see a Dialogflow integration at some point in the future. So here I'm in the actions on Google Console, and this is where I'm building out an action on Google. And so these are kind of apps for the Google Assistant. I'm creating an invocation name, and that's that you give access to your app. So when they say, "Hey Google, sleeping
concierge,"
and there I'm testing it to hear
Sleepington's
what it sounds like.
concierge.
And so this way, if someone says, "Hey Google, talk to Sleepington's concierge," that's what's actually going to put them in touch with my action, my app, and actually let them start to ask those questions. So now that I've got that the name in place, I can use the actions on Google Simulator to test it in here as well and really get a sense of how this is going to behave when someone's using it via the Google Assistant, via either a Google Home or on the Assistant app. So I can come down here and say, "Talk to Sleepington's concierge."
Sure. Here's the test version of Sleepington's concierge.
Oops, let's try that again.
Sure. Here's the test version of Sleepington's concierge.
Greetings.
And I'm asking the question I want to return something.
You can return any purchased items within 30 days.
Perfect. And I've gotten my response. I can see over here on the right what it's actually going to look like in the Google Assistant app. I can see some debug information, the request and response, the full JSON that come through. I can see here I can edit the SSML.
You can return any purchased items within 30 days.
That's speech synthesis markup language. If I wanted to add emphasis to any particular words, I could do that there. The more debugging information, the errors, I can view the logs if I'd like to. So there's a strange sound on this tab. Apologies, I'm going to mute that. So here I am, I'm adding what's called a rich response. So these are those affordances I was talking about before, right? So here I can add what's called a basic card. So on my response, when it says that the returns are allowed, I can actually have a card that appears in the interface that's going to look like this. Well, actually, first let's add some more frequently asked questions. Just going through, repeating that same process, adding several different questions.
Talk to Sleepington's concierge.
All right, getting the test version of Sleepington's concierge.
Welcome to Sleepington's. I can answer questions about your orders of our fine sleep-related products. How can I help?
Do you accept returns?
You can return any purchased items within 30 days.
Do you ship internationally?
We'll ship to Canada, Mexico, and the EU.
Cool, so there we can see that rich response, really see that full interaction taking place in the Google Assistant, and it wasn't very difficult, right? We got that up and running very, very quickly. and we were able to reduce, an actual voice app, something that folks can use to just ask our business questions directly. So the fact that we can now do this, that anyone can sit down and build this is really, really incredible. So our second use case was operations, right? So workers now spend most of their day in chat. So the popularity and Slack couch chat that lagging stride means that employees are moving away from email and they want to communicate more in real time. So there's really a huge opportunity to tap into. So streamlining a business's internal communication can increase employee productivity. The conversational interfaces that live within these workplace chat platforms can automate many of your company's processes and tedious manual tasks. So think about as a designer how often you have to check in with stakeholders about getting their feedback on the design. That's the type of thing that you can start to automate. And conversational interfaces in the enterprise space are really about optimizing and automating these internal processes and communication. So at Sleepingtons, they're using this e-commerce system here, and when a manager wants to check the orders, they need to come in and this is a familiar search interface. I've got drop downs, but let's say they're looking, across a particular time range. So they go to that filter again and, okay, yeah, it looks like I can't type, but it's a calendar thing. All right, well, that works. We're familiar with those, right? So I can enter the date that I'm looking for, and I mean this works. It certainly works, but again, when this manager sat down, they knew exactly what it was they wanted to do. And they can either repeatedly each time go through and click those filters and maybe click 9 or 10 times before they get what they want, or we can set it up with a Slack bot where they can just ask. So the first thing I would need to do is to create a Slack app. Here I'm in the Slack API console. I've just given it a name. And then I'll need to add a bot user. And that's, again, just giving it the name. I'd like for folks to be able to reference it as, @salesbot when they're inside inside of Slack, and just be able to ask it some questions about our sales figures. So then I'll need to, gather my app credentials. I'll actually enable, although there on that left-hand side, the one-click integrations. There's another one for Slack. I'll enable that. I add all my various credentials to make sure that you can talk to the Slack app. If you've ever set up a Slack bot before, it's a familiar process, setting up OAuth. All of this is very well documented in the Dialogflow documentation. I've got to set up the events. These are the things that I'd actually like my Slack bot to respond to. So, when it's messaged directly, or if it receives a message in various groups. And then again, I'll need to create a new intent. So here I'm in a new agent for my sales bot. I'm going to create a new intent called check sales. And we'll say, okay, what were our total sales last week? Something a manager's going to be interested in. And we'll see it highlighted last week. And again, right, this is an entity. It recognizes that this is a period, right, a date period. We're wondering about this particular time. And then I can, because this isn't going to be a static response, right? It's going to change each time someone asks. We're actually going to have to fetch that data from an API. So I went down and enabled what's called webhook fulfillment. So what this means is when someone hits this particular intent, rather than giving them back a static response, I'm going to use a webhook. And here I can actually write some code directly inside of the Dialogflow interface in their inline editor. And I'll have some code that's actually going to generate that response for me. So it's not going to be the same each time for this particular intent. So now I need to test that intent in the console. So we'll say, what were our total sales in May? We'll see, okay, great, it's been properly recognized. It's actually recognized properly that date that we referenced. And so now we need to actually use that code to generate a response. So here's an example from one of Google's standard libraries you can find on GitHub. This is their node weather fulfillment example. And so here, this is someone asking about a weather forecast, right? So we won't get too much into this, but you can see that you're calling an API, you're getting some data back from it, and then you're actually building out that templated response that you then send back, and that's what's going to be spoken back to the user. So let's see how our support bot might actually look. So we're asking a question at SalesBot, what were our total sales in June? Cool, so it's actually hit that API, it's found the actual number for that particular month, and it's actually, that's obviously not a real graph, but because one of the affordances that we have in Slack is to use images, you'll see for like dynamic bits of data or graphs or things like that, folks will just generate an image. So that's our operations use case, building tools to make lives easier for our employees, to improve our internal processes. And the third use case, and obviously this is an e-commerce business, is going to be commerce. So commerce is another really great opportunity for conversational interfaces. So consumers are more likely to purchase with companies that they can actually message directly. But it can be really costly for a company to invest in any kind of human live chat to be available when their customers are shopping. So conversational interfaces can really provide a concierge-like experience where a conversational interface is helping the user make a purchasing decision by automating that conversation. So conversational platforms like Amazon and Facebook have integrated payments as well as the Google Assistant so that you can transact seamlessly with saved credit card information. Very similar to kind of in-app purchases on iOS, if you're familiar with those. People are already using bots for ordering food, for shopping, for purchasing apps, for information, services. And a recent study found that 35% of voice assistant users have already bought products using their voice devices. So here we're going to see an example of what that interaction for Sleepingtons might look like on a Google Home device.
Okay, Google, talk to Sleepingtons Concierge.
Okay, let's get the test version of Sleepingtons Concierge.
Welcome to Sleepingtons. We have many fine products that will help you get a better night's rest, like bed sheets, sleep masks, and white noise machines. What are you looking for today?
An aromatherapy candle?
We offer a wide variety of aromatherapy products to meet all your snoozing needs. It looks like you actually ordered our lavender soy wax candle a couple of months ago. That's a popular choice. Would you like to order the same one again?
Yeah.
Great. I've added that to your cart. Would you like to keep shopping or complete your purchase?
I'll check out.
Great. Should I use the address I have on file at 408 East 43rd Street?
Yeah.
Okay. The total is $12.46. Are you ready to place the order?
Yes.
Great. I've sent the receipt to the Assistant app on your device. I'll also send an update there when your item has shipped. Thanks for shopping with Sleepingtons.
So there we can really start to see a lot of the advantages of voice commerce, right? So consumers can really purchase the instant they remember a need. So those of you that might have a Google Home device, you may already be doing this, right? You're in the kitchen, you realize you're out of paper towels, and you say, hey, order me some more paper towels. And it can recognize the context, right? So it might say, like, would you like to order, the same ones you ordered last time? And that's really a frictionless experience, right? The consumer can go from need to purchase just by speaking, right? Just by having the thought and uttering it out loud. It's a really frictionless experience. You don't even have to go digging for your wallet if you already have your payment information entered on that particular platform. And voice is, again, really excellent for complex search. So for helping users navigate through what could be a complex product catalog. And another important thing to remember here is that smart speakers are actually the most quickly adopted consumer technology in history. So, before that was the smartphone, and now smart speakers have really trounced that. And so these are millions of homes across the world already, and that number is only going to continue to increase. So with that, I'd like to say, thanks to everyone, and thanks to Bill for having me. A quick plug for Voxable. We build these conversational interfaces. We also conduct training workshops, custom training, as well as public workshops. So please get in touch. And with that, I will take your questions over here in the chat.
Great. Thanks, Matt. So does anybody have any questions? If you have questions, you can type in the chat window.
Other languages. Okay. Yes. So yes, the Google Assistant does support other languages. If you Google Google Assistant language support, you should get the full list. I can't recall offhand how many are supported at the moment, but there's certainly they're adding more, working on adding more all the time. The last time I checked, it was 8, but then someone told me it was up in the teens. I'm not positive, and that differs from platform to platform. So of course, Alexa's going to have a different set of languages that they support. Dell, I didn't understand your question. If you'd like to ask again. Okay, so we've got, is Dialogflow the same platform that is used to add the user's own commands to Google Assistant? Exactly. So there are a couple of if you're looking to build an action, so that's like a customized experience, a customized app, like we went through today. Dialogflow is the primary way that you could do that. You can also use what's called the Conversations SDK if you want to. So you're not required to use Dialogflow. You can really use any kind of natural language understanding platform that you'd like, but Dialogflow is definitely the simplest way to get started. And then there's also ways for users to kind of build their own, I can't remember the word that's used for these. They're like recipes, so a set of things that they would like to happen that you can give a name. You can do that directly in the Google Assistant app. So I think they're called routines. So might have like a morning routine that sets the lights to a particular place and turns on the radio, things like that. So I got a question here. What's the difference between NLP or NLU? So this is NLP is natural language processing, and NLU is natural language understanding. So there's definitely a lot of overlap here but between these two. What we talked about today, this kind of intent recognition and entity extraction, that's natural language understanding, so trying to garner meaning from text. It's kind of a subset of natural language processing. And natural language processing might have a variety of different user goals there. One thing you might do with natural language processing is what's called semantic search. So allowing, taking, maybe you've got like a huge knowledge base that you'd like folks to be able to ask a question, and then rather doing keyword search, actually taking, processing the question itself to understand the component parts of speech and the words and how they relate. And then running that same process over your knowledge base so that you can actually perform a search that's going to be a lot more accurate. So there are a variety of different goals with natural language processing, but a lot of it's going to be around taking large volumes of that kind of unstructured data, large volumes of text, and being able to do valuable things with it. So I got another question. How do you recognize the slot value, for example, how to extract location, time, etc. from the text? So that would be a process of creating, and we didn't really get into this, and that's where you're creating your own developer-defined entities. And so that's where I might create an entity, and there are also some system entities that are provided by Dialogflow for us. So there's a cities system entity I could use. So I might enter an utterance with a name of a city, and that would be recognized by Dialogflow. I could also create my own custom entities, developer-defined entities. So if I was building a bot to allow folks to order pizza, then I'm going to have like a toppings entity, right, where I list all the various pizza toppings. And then when I go in and I'm building my intents and I use one of those toppings, so I might have an intent where someone is saying, I'd like to order a pizza with mushrooms and onions. Then I would just highlight both of those words and then mark those as that particular entity so that when that intent was recognized, it would also extract those entities for me. Yeah, so a question if I can do a comparison of Alexa, Google Assistant, Siri in terms of popularity, pros and cons, and ease of building apps. Yeah, that's definitely a longer conversation, but at a high level, I would say that there's definitely a lot of similarity when you're building for the Amazon Alexa and the Google Assistant. I would say that the building in Dialogflow is going to be a little bit more approachable. It's a touch easier than building inside of the Amazon Alexa developer console. When you use that, you'll notice that it's very, very similar to the Dialogflow console. It was released after Dialogflow, the latest version of their console was. I think that the Amazon Alexa was definitely more popular. It had the head start. It was released before the Google Home. And I believe, we don't know exactly because we don't know the exact sales figures, but it's probably there are more of those out there than there are for Google Home devices. But the Google Assistant also runs on phones and soon is coming to what are, smart display devices they're called. So like the Echo Show from Amazon. So, and actually a couple of months ago was the first month that the Google Home outpaced the Alexa, the Echo devices in terms of sales. So I think Google's definitely going to catch up to the Alexa. If you have both of these, the reason that is, I think, is because Google has spent the past decade plus organizing all of the world's information. So it's much, much better at kind of answering general knowledge questions that you might have than the Alexa is. And for that reason, I think that it's a more useful device. So our money personally is on Google, but I don't think either of these platforms is going away anytime soon. Both companies are spending lots and lots of money. Thousands of engineers at both companies, I know they're hiring thousands for the Alexa platform at Amazon, and Google is really, you're starting to see conversational interfaces popping up across the entire suite of products powered by the same assistant platform. So you'll see it now in Google Analytics. There's an assistant where you can just ask questions about your analytics data, all powered by the same technologies. Now Apple is way, way behind. Because Apple is so focused on kind of locking things down, even though there's a Siri kit, it only works in like a few very narrow use cases. It's not at all as flexible as the other platforms. So they've definitely got some catching up to do. So I got a question here about how mature is Rasa. I haven't used Rasa myself. It is very, very interesting because they're very focused on kind of using cutting edge natural language understanding research and putting that into practice. So putting that into their system. And it also they're one of the ways that you can build your conversations is by kind of training based on example conversations that you give it. So it's a kind of a different approach. I would definitely recommend checking out their documentation, but I know it's being used in production applications. And a lot of it's built on existing tools, open source natural language understanding tools, a lot coming out of like Stanford. So another question on how you handle dialect. That is a great question. So that's really up to the platform as to how well the automatic speech recognition actually works. I would say Google is getting better and better at this, at handling dialect, but there are also stories from folks, so accent is another question here. So when you're dealing with the particular dialects, you can build those ways that something might be phrased into your natural language understanding model. So when I'm building my utterances, I'll want to make sure that I've got a few y'alls in there to handle Texans like myself, and because y'all is just a superior word that needs to be part of the English language, and so I can handle that in the model, and the accent is what's going to be up to the platform. And you'll hear stories from users that do have kind of heavy accents that they'll try to mimic, you know, an actor. So I heard of a fellow with an accent who would just try to mimic Tom Cruise because he found that the voice interface had an easier time handling his accent that way. But it's definitely getting much, much better at handling accents. So any details about how Dialogflow was built? That's a great question. Not really. It's kind of a black box. We don't know how it's implemented, you know, like many commercial products. But it's not really a hindrance because that's true really of any kind of machine learning, you know, AI platform at least that you're going to use. But machine learning generally, we don't know how it is making the decisions it is making. I mean, at a high level, we know how we trained it, but the machine learning models themselves are kind of not really accessible to us because we don't know how to think in multi-dimensional hyperspace. But yeah, so we're not really sure how it was built, but we do know at a high level it's kind of using those natural language understanding techniques of recognizing its intents and extracting entities. Can it run on iOS as well? Yeah, definitely. So the Google Assistant, there's a Google Assistant app that you can get on the iOS App Store. And I would definitely recommend downloading that and checking it out. It'll really give you a sense of, you know, what it's like to work with the Google Assistant, to use voice apps, and there you can actually browse all of the actions that are available for you to interact with, and really get a sense of, you know, what the capabilities are of the platform. So is there a deep learning model for NLU in Dialogflow? I'm not positive. That would be my suspicion, because that's definitely a core strength of the way that Google does AI, is their kind of deep learning. I would assume that TensorFlow is being used at this point, but again, we don't really know. Also, because this was an acquisition of a product called API.ai out of Russia, you know, there's been a lot of work going on to really integrate it into the Google platform. So I'm sure a lot of changes have been made. There's now a version 2 of the API that's more in line with the way that Google does things. Okay, so how to make use of context in a multi-turn dialogue? That's a fantastic question. So I would definitely check out the Dialogflow documentation. There's a whole section on contexts. And so here you can use contexts. So this is like if someone is going to say, you know, like, they might say, are the lights in the living room on? And the system might say, you know, no. And then if the next thing that they said was, okay, well, turn them on. Well, the system's going to need to know what them is referencing, right? And this is something that we as humans do all the time by building this kind of shared understanding as we speak. And the way that machines do this is with context. So knowing the context of the conversation. So the context is we were discussing the lights in the living room.